our speaker. Oh, let's see. This way? No. No. This way. Trying to adjust the camera. Okay. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
So grateful to be here today. Ooh. Okay. Is that level? Will that stay? Okay, so my talk today is going to be on Today, my talk is going to be on a spiritual code of conduct. And I say a spiritual code of conduct because this is just an example of a spiritual code of conduct, because we all could have different spiritual code of conduct. So this is just an example. Now, I'm going to reference the book, Tapping the Power Within, A Path to Self-Empowerment for Women by Jan Levanzit. Has anybody read this book? Anybody? No? Yes. It's one of my favorite books, and Jan Levanzit is one of my favorite authors, so I wanted to do a talk on, one of her books, so I chose this one. Now, you can get her books. I have most of her books on my Barnes & Noble Nook, but you can get them. I think Hoopla has a lot of hers on audiobook, so her books are amazing, and I recommend that you get them. So she talks about a spiritual code of conduct in chapter 14 of her book. Now, when we think of a code of conduct, it's what an organization usually drafts up for their company. They're usually written statements that convey expectations of what is appropriate for and what is not appropriate for that organization. So Yana tells us that a spiritual code of conduct provides a basic framework for the development of individual desire, thought, and action that embodies the true nature of spirit. And that this spiritual code of conduct requires that we accept our oneness with the Creator as a source of power, knowingness, truth, and order in our lives. Now, she lists 13 principles of this spiritual code of conduct. And, a lot of them relate to our 12 powers of unity and our unity principles. And the 13 that she lists are unconditional love, truth, willingness, righteousness, responsibility, discipline, humility, compassion, perseverance, patience, speaking with a conscious tongue, selflessness, and tithing. Now, a lot of those principles, make sense to me. So I'm just going to go through all these principles and show how maybe I missed the mark in following this principle, or I've actually followed the principle in my life, and how we all can apply it to our lives. So I'll start with the first one, unconditional love. So when you think of unconditional love, what do you think of? I know for me, I think of that as the love that God has for us. God loves us unconditionally, despite our behaviors, despite, our actions. He loves us unconditionally. And when we love from the God within us, then we are, showing unconditional love to ourselves and all others. Now, when we practice the principle of unconditional love, we eliminate fear, for there is no fear in love. The question we should ask ourselves when we practice this principle of unconditional love is, am I promoting and or creating what I would want for myself? Now, when I practice unconditional love in my life, I haven't always practiced it, I guess, the way it should be practiced. When I think of this question, am I promoting or creating what I want for myself? When I think of unconditional love, I think of, I love this person. Even though they're disrespecting me, I just got to, deal with it because I need to practice unconditional love. But that's not unconditional love, because that's not love if you're allowing somebody to disrespect you, right? So that's things that I'm learning in my life, that I'm a work in progress, I guess you could say, to realize that sometimes you have to love people from a distance, because if they're disrespecting you, you shouldn't put up with that because you're trying to practice unconditional love. You can love them from a distance, and, still want the best for them, but just realize you cannot be around that particular person. So I'm learning. Now, the Bible verses, I believe that, if we follow these Bible verses, we will be able to practice unconditional love would be, Matthew chapter 7, verse 12 says, "In everything, do to others as you would have them do to you, for this is the law and the prophets." If we, show love for others, we'll get love back. It's the law of cause and effect. And I also think Matthew 22, verses 34 to 40, love God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your might, and, love your neighbor as yourself. That's another sign of showing unconditional love using the Bible. Now, the next principle is truth. And truth are the immutable laws of the universe that are in alignment with the mind of God as they operate in the physical world reality. Now, when we practice the principle of truth, we eliminate the misperceptions of the ego. The question we should ask ourselves is what I am thinking, saying, and or doing a reflection of what I know about the nature of God? Now, when I first discovered unity, I'm a reader, so I got all the books that I could get, from Unity, all the classic books like Lessons in Truth by H. Emily Cady, like the old books from co-founder Charles Fillmore's, Atom Smashing Power of Mind is one of them. And what I discovered when I read most of these classic Unity books were that Unity considers themselves to be truth students. And I thought that was really interesting. And that's truth with a capital T. I thought that was really, really fascinating when I discovered Unity. So it made me realize that we are all on a journey, to discover the truth of God. It's a journey, and we may never reach the destination to fully understand God because God is unlimited. But we are on a journey together as we discover God within ourselves and within the world. And I like Charles Fillmore's definition of truth as defined in the Metaphysical Bible Dictionary. And he tells us that truth is the absolute. It's that which God is divine principle, that which has been, ever will be, that which eternally is. The truth of God is reality, the same yesterday, the same today, and forever. Next principle is willingness. And willingness is the ability to accept what happens in the moment as the divine order of what needs to happen. And when we practice this principle of willingness, we eliminate resistance. The question we ask ourselves, is God's will greater than my will? Now, when I think about willingness for me, I know I've resisted change in my life. I'm sure we all have resisted change in our lives. And I just remember back when I was laid off from my first job, working there 9 years, almost 10 years, and I ended up getting laid off. Of course, I was devastated because I loved the job. I was there that long, I loved it. And I was really, in a dark place at that time. And I was like, at the time I was also pregnant. I was on second semester going into the third trimester, and I was just, nobody's gonna give me a job. I'm pregnant. I'm gonna have to be out, even though jobs can't discriminate. In my head, I'm just like, they're gonna discriminate. They're not gonna want to hire somebody who's about to be out of work. And those were the thoughts that were going on in my head. But I had to realize that I had to let go of my will and realize that I needed to remember God's will, that God's will in my life, that everything was going to work out for the highest good. So I needed to have faith. So I did take time to connect with God, go into meditation, realize that I'm going to get a job, and I'm going to get a job better than what I had. And 6 weeks later, I got a job. And now I'm a supervisor there, so, everything works out. And I'll be moving on to another position very shortly. So, I had to realize to remove my will and allow God's will to show up in my life. And that goes to my favorite Bible verse, which is Luke chapter 22:42. "Father, if you are willing, remove this cup from me. Yet not my will, but yours be done." Next principle is righteousness. And righteousness is the right use of your mind, speech, talents, and resources in service to the highest good for yourself and others. Now, when we practice this principle of righteousness, we eliminate manipulation. For when we are operating from what's right for us, we can't be manipulated. And the question we should say is, what is the best possible thing to do or say that will create harmony or balance for all? Now, I haven't always had the best understanding of righteousness, especially when I was younger, back in high school. With traditional Christianity, I always thought righteousness as of, our way is the right way, your way is the wrong way. We are going to heaven, you're going to hell. That's what righteousness, I thought of it as that when I was younger. And it made me think about back in high school, my twin sister and I would go to, these churches, area churches, because we like to go to plays. So these churches would have these, I call them heaven and hell plays, but I don't know what they were really called, but that's what I called them, because basically that's what they would do. They would show, this is what will happen if you accept Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior. You'll go to heaven, and then it would have like acting of heaven. And if you don't, accept Jesus as your Lord and Savior, this is what's going to happen. And this would show hell. And the plays are really good. Like I said, I like the plays, so I like to go to watch the plays. Now, at the end of the play, they would always say, okay, now, if you want to accept Jesus as your Lord and Savior, come on up here and get saved. Guess what me and my sister would do? We would be right in the back of the church, and we would run out. No. It just wasn't what we wanted to do. We just wanted to have, go and see a good play. That's all we wanted to do. But, our understanding, I guess at the time, wasn't that we wanted to do that. And at the time, I didn't even know about unity. So I just knew that that wasn't what was right for me. It wasn't right for me. So we would leave out. And we went to I know it was more than one that we went to those plays, but we just like going to plays. And so, like I said, I didn't even know about unity. I just knew that understanding, the traditional understanding, did not make sense to me. And then when I found unity and realized that, they believe, heaven and hell are states of mind, I was like, oh, okay, that makes more sense to me. That's what I've always believed, but I just didn't know how to say it or, how to express that. So that's just my opinion about righteousness. I believe it's the right use and of your speech, of your talents, and I believe I use my talents and my speech here at Unity, and it's righteousness for me here. All right, the next principle is responsibility. Now, responsibility is the ability to respond with conscious intent, without doing harm. And when we practice the principle of responsibility, we eliminate blame and projection. When we take responsibility, we can't blame others, and we don't project, our own mess on other people. Now, the question you should ask with responsibility is, how did I contribute to this situation or circumstance that I'm in? And what have I learned as a result of experiencing it? Now, I can just think of many times where I, haven't, taken responsibility for what I've done, or it took me a while to get there, to get to that place of taking responsibility. It makes me think of the story I think I told before here of how I lost my contact lens in a speaker box under my desk. Still can't believe that story, but yeah, I could not find my contact lens. I was really upset when I was taking my contacts out. Now, I have hard contacts, so I have to use a plunger in order to get it out. So I was just really upset, trying to get it out my eye, and it popped out. And I was like, okay, well, maybe it's on the floor. It's going to be on the floor, right? It was not on the floor, and it was dirty. So I was like, well, I'm going to have to clean it. So I even cleaned it, and I still couldn't find the contact. It wasn't until I took a step back and said, okay, God is my source. I will find this contact. I need to just relax and realize that the only way I'm going to find this contact is if I realize that God's my source, take some time away, get into meditation. So that's what I did. And I was like, I'm going to look for it in the morning. And when I looked for it in the morning and I still couldn't find it, I said, okay, it's got to be somewhere around here. And the speaker box is right there. So when I shook it, I heard something rattling in there. I was like, okay, so it has to be in there, Now I had to ask myself, how did I contribute to the situation? And I would say, first of all, that I didn't realize, God was my source. The whole situation, a part of why, I was so in a rush to get my contact out and I wasn't paying attention was because at that time, I was worried about my daughter getting COVID because somebody in her class had COVID, and she had to be out for 2 weeks. And I had just finished maternity leave after being out for 6 weeks without pay because I was a temp worker. So I was worried about all that stuff, and all that stuff was in my head when I was trying to get my contact out. So I contributed to that situation by not, realizing that I need to take a step back before I tried to take my contacts out. And what I learned about the situation is to do that. And also, as far as like the physicals, when I take my contact out, make sure I'm over the desk instead of, being back here trying to take it out. Because at least if I'm over the desk, it will fall on the desk. So that's one of the lessons I learned from that situation. And I can't say it didn't happen again because it did, but it didn't go in the speaker box this time. It just fell on the floor. But I am trying to be more conscious when I take off my contacts. And the next principle excuse me, is discipline. Oh goodness. Discipline is repeated actions that demonstrate internal and external cooperation in alignment with a specific intention. So when we practice the principle of discipline, we eliminate procrastination. Oh my goodness. Procrastination is one of the things that I do a lot. And the question we should ask ourselves is, am I doing all that I must do to realize my vision without harming myself or others? Excuse me. Okay, so like I said, I struggle with the principle of discipline, but I would say I'm too hard on myself sometimes because I've been disciplined to, complete school. I completed my degree, so obviously I have some discipline, but within that discipline, there might have been times where I procrastinated on work. And I think about I'm trying to write my second book, but I completed my first book. I got it self-published. So I should, look and realize that, sometimes why am I procrastinating? Why I might not be completing my second book. Maybe I just don't have the time right now. Maybe it's not what is mine to do right now, so maybe it's something that I need to do later on. Right now I'm trying to focus on raising, my 2 young children. I'm trying to get further in my career at work. So, right now writing a second book might not be mine to do. It might be mine to do later on. I just got to realize what my intention is. And my intention, for writing my first book, was to, excuse me, get it out there and share it with the world. And the second book will be a continuation of that. But right now, it might not be my intention to do. And if I never get back to it, it's okay because I'm grateful for the experience that I did have. But if I do get back to it, and I hope I do, I will be grateful for the experience as well. So, and the same goes with my spiritual degree. So I got my spiritual degree from the International Metaphysical Ministry at the University of Metaphysics to become a minister because I wanted to gain more knowledge for writing my books as well as, share my experience with spirituality. So I did get my Bachelor of Metaphysical degree, but I also said I'm going to continue on and get the Master's of Metaphysical Science degree and then the Doctor of, Ministry and Metaphysical Science as well. But I haven't been able to get back to that as well. And, sometimes I just be so hard on myself, I signed up for this, or I haven't had time to do it, but it might not be mine to do right now. And I will find the time to do it. I will. But right now I want to focus on my, my career and helping my children as they're young still. And that's just one example of, how I've used discipline and how I've been procrastinating in my life, but it's okay because God loves us all as we are going through these experiences. Next principle is humility, and that's living, giving, and sharing from a heart-centered, egoless manner in service to others without regard of a reward or a recognition. Now, when we practice this principle of humility, we eliminate feeling used or manipulated. The question we should ask ourselves is, what do I hope to gain for myself? Now with humility, I've always been a person that like to help people. That's why I'm like in the service industry now, where I help people. It's just something that I've always loved to do. And sometimes when I do things like when I'm a platform assistant here, Reverend Dan's always saying, oh, you do such an amazing job, as a platform assistant. And I always be like, thank you. You do such an amazing job as a speaker. And he does do an amazing job, as the minister. But, sometimes you should just accept a compliment and, not always push it off on, somebody else. Just accept the compliment. And I have a hard time of doing that. Sometimes I feel the imposter syndrome, I guess you could say, where people are just saying stuff to be nice, but people might really actually value what I do. So I have to remind myself of that and realize that. So when I think of humility, that's what I think of. Now, the next principle is compassion. And compassion is empathetic presence that inspires, motivates, and encourages rather than overpowers. So when you practice this principle of compassion, this eliminates false responsibility. The question we should ask ourselves is, am I my brother or my sister's keeper? The answer to that is no. I am my brother and sister. So, as a supervisor on my job, I feel like compassion is very important when you're a supervisor, because you have to deal with people having to call out for different various reasons. You have to listen to them and, have to put yourself in their shoes, and say, I may have never gone through whatever you're going through, but, I'm going to try to put myself in your shoes and, understand you from your perspective. I know Reverend Dan always talks about how, sometimes it's not good to give advice to somebody if you haven't gone through that certain situation yourself, but you can always be there, for them. And yeah, like me, I don't know how it feels to be, alcoholic or be smoking, because I've never done it. But, a lot of people don't know how to, I guess, be with me when I tried to, explain how I've lost, my daughter, my mom, and my dad all in the same year. Sometimes people would rather just not be around you versus, just being there. They would just, rather just, and that's how I feel, sometimes with that. But I feel like, sometimes you just need to be there, even if you don't say anything, just being there, showing that sacred space. Is that for me? Thank you. Thank you very much. And that's how I feel about compassion. Take a water break. Okay. And the next principle is perseverance. Now, I love this principle, perseverance. And that is consciously committed action toward a desired outcome. Now, when we practice this principle of perseverance, this eliminates mental and physical weariness. We ask ourselves, are we being true to our stated intention? And that just makes me think back to many things that I persevered. Now, when I was first asked to give a talk here, I was like, I'm a quiet person. Why would I get up here and talk? Why would anybody want to hear what I have to say? I'm quiet. I don't even do anything. I just stay home. I'm a homebody. What would I have to share? But we all have something to share, don't we? Do we not? So, I had to get all those thoughts out of my head and say, you know what? I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to write something and I'm going to just come up here and talk. And my first talk, I believe, was on spiritual affirmations, which is what I use a lot. And I received, a lot of feedback from others saying that I did a good job. And again, I had that imposter syndrome, mine saying, oh, I didn't do a good job. They're just being nice. But when I looked at it, I was like, maybe I did do a good job, So, yeah, spiritual affirmations have always been something that I use. And I persevere. I took that talk and then I did even more. And I enjoyed it. It was fun for me. And other times where I persevere, even with writing my first book, I read I think it was a meme or something on social media that said, if you don't see the book that you want to read, write it. And I was like, I'm not a writer though, I'm a numbers person. I went to school for accounting. I can't write a book. But I'm like, well, why not? Why can't I not write a book? So I know I want to see because I'm into cozy mystery books and spiritual books. And I was like, I would love to see, a combination of those. And I hadn't seen one. And I was like, well, why don't I just write it? So that's what I did. I went ahead and wrote my first book in the spiritual bookstore mystery. And I went through all the steps to get it self-published, and, I was like, well, if nobody likes it, it's okay. I wrote it for myself, and I'm going to share it with others because there might be someone else out there who likes it. And it was people who I don't even know who's reached out and said, oh, I like your book. When are you going to write your second one? And I'm like, wow, I didn't imagine that this would happen. So I'm grateful that I persevered through that doubts of, oh, I'm not going to write a book because I'm not a writer. And I've shared it with people and they liked it. And, like I said, hopefully I can get back to writing that second one. But yeah, that's just a few stories of how I persevered through situations in my life. Now, the next principle is patience. Now, patience is courageous inner strength born of trust and humility. When we practice the principle of patience, we eliminate hasty, unconscious choices. The question we should ask ourselves is this the best time for the manifestation of my desire? And that goes back to what I was talking about how I haven't had time to write my second book or haven't been able to go back to school and complete my spiritual degrees, I have to practice spiritual patience. Have to realize, it's not the time for the manifestation of those desires right now. Right now I'm trying to focus on moving into a new position at work, helping my children. I have a son that's 6 and a daughter that's 2. They're young. I'm trying to help them with homework all the time, with potty training. I have to practice patience with these as well because, my son is learning to read still, so I'm trying to help him. I have to realize I have to be patient. I had to learn how to read one time as well, so I'm trying to, put myself in his shoes when he gets very frustrated. And when I get frustrated, I have to realize I have to practice patience. And that's for that principle. Now, the next one is speaking with a conscious tongue. Now, we have to be mindful of the energy that our words create. Not every word that we utter is a prayer. And that makes me think of the song, Our Thoughts Are Prayers. And that's a song that we sing here at Unity. It's also one of my favorite songs. But yeah, we sing that song here. Now, when we practice this principle of, a conscious tongue, we have to ask ourselves, are our words kind? Are they necessary? And are they for the highest good of everyone involved? Now, I know I talked about how I like to use spiritual affirmations. Now, if you see my desk at work, I have the Unity Pray It Forward cards. I don't know if did any of y'all get those cards in the mail? So I have those lined up at my desk. So whenever I'm at my desk and I'm getting frustrated with, people getting emails, crazy emails, I have to look up and read my Pray It Forward cards and become back centered. I had to do that quite a lot. And I think that helps me speak with a conscious tongue. So when somebody comes up to me with a problem, I can just say, I looked at my Unity prayer cards and now I can speak to you positively. And most people, they were like to me, you never raise your voice. Why don't you ever raise your voice? And I just say, hey, I just try to, stay centered. I try not to show too much of my spiritual self at work, but I feel like you can do that in a non-spiritual way. You could be spiritual in a non-spiritual way at work. And I know that that's what I try to convey when I'm at work, speaking with a conscious tongue. And I try to do that with my children as well, speak to them with a conscious tongue. That always doesn't happen. Sometimes you get really frustrated. That we all do. But you just have to remember, Reverend Dan always says, remember that God is our source. And I just want to say, our thoughts are prayers? Can we just say those together? Our thoughts are prayers, and we are always praying. Our thoughts are prayers, Be careful what you're saying. That's enough, but yeah. All right, and the next principle is selflessness. And that's the inner security that serves the heart and overrides the demands of the ego to conquer. When we practice this principle of selflessness, it eliminates the quest for ruthless power. The question we should ask ourselves is, what can I do to serve and support others in this experience? And this makes me think of the song by Ricky Byers that goes, how can I serve today? And it goes, how can I serve today, sweet spirit? How can I serve today? Oh Lord, speak in ways that I can understand. Where you lead me, I will follow. Where you lead me, I will go. And that's what I think of. And it makes me think of, what can I do to help anyone? You know, what can I do to help here? What can I do to help at work? What can I do to help at home? You know, we think of selflessness, and maybe sometimes I go too far with selflessness and forget myself. I just have to remember that in order to serve others, I have to serve myself first. And the last principle that Iyanla says should be in a spiritual code of conduct is tithing. And then tithing is grateful giving and sharing of resources to a person or a place that encourages our spiritual growth. And when we practice this principle, we eliminate supporting unworthy spiritual sources. And we know that the universal law of I don't know if I'm saying this right, reciprocity states that what we give, we get back 100-fold. And that tithing enacts this law. Now, I like Reverend Dan's definition of tithing is basically what this said. You know, you give your resources to where you're spiritually fed. And that could be church, but that could also be, I think he said something about a masseuse. It could be anywhere that you're feeling spiritually fed. Now, I'm still work in progress when it comes to tithing. I'll be honest. I grew up in a non-religious family. We really didn't go to church. So the principle of tithing was never, I guess it was never ingrained in me, because we never really went to church. Or if my mom did go to church, we really didn't practice the principle of tithing. But I've seen it, I guess you could say miracles for a lot of people, like people that have shared their stories here at Unity about how tithing has helped them. So I do believe in the power of tithing. Okay, so those were all of the 13 principles of a spiritual code of conduct, according to Iyanla. Now, the most important thing to remember when you are practicing a spiritual code of conduct is to accept your oneness with God. Of course, your spiritual code of conduct could be different from this one. Mine probably would be different from this one. This is just an example. But you should think about it. You know, go into meditation. You know, connect with God. See what God reveals to you about a spiritual code of conduct for your life. And for the meditation, I'm going to read a spiritual code of conduct prayer that Iyanla shares in her book. So you can get comfortable in your seats and close your eyes. I'll read the prayer, and then we can sit in spiritual silence for a little while as we reflect on the words. So get comfortable in your seats, close your eyes. It is my sincere, reverent, and humble intention to open my heart and lay down all defenses. I ask for and open myself to receive correction and direction from the Holy Spirit as it relates to any limitations present in my consciousness as a thought, feeling, belief, attitude, judgment, and projection, perception. learning, or pattern of behavior that in any way hinders, blocks, delays, or obstructs my willingness, readiness, or ability to make self-loving, self-honoring choices in every aspect of my life. I ask that the parts of me that are ready to be healed and the parts of me that resist healing be brought into submission and service of God's will for the highest and greatest good of all involved. Let it be so, and so it is. Now let us sit in silence for a few minutes.